Hey everyone, another day, another handheld, with this one being a new budget handheld named the XGB35. The XGB35 is available around the $30-ish mark. Looking at the box, it mentions it's a Linux system, whatever that is, 2 gigs of RAM, which I do doubt considering it does have trouble with both Game Boy Advance and PlayStation 1 games, the 7051 CPU, 3.5-inch IPS display, and supports up to PlayStation 1 games. So for the XGB35, I've taken the spec list straight from the listing itself, though I'm not sure if it has 2 gigs of RAM, just by judging by its performance, which does definitely get a bit shaky around the more intensive Megadrive games, GBA games and PlayStation 1 games, though we have seen the ATM 7051 CPU in these budget handhelds before, and can somewhat expect that kind of performance. Otherwise, the specs match up with the box with a 3.5-inch screen, mini HDMI out, internal memory, as well as some bits about the video and music, playback and the like. Straight out of the box, things start to look a bit dicey, I'm afraid, with the 3.5-inch screen having an uneven bezel all around, with it being quite thick along the right and bottom sides, while thin along the top and left, which makes it look hugely uneven. The front of the shell has this sanded down effect to it, which somewhat ironically makes it feel very rough and stand out in the worst possible way. On the right side, we've got the power button, SD card slot, and reset button, and nothing on top. On the back, we've got the huge speaker grille, the shoulder buttons, and can sneak a peek at the battery inside, which looks to be a 2000 mAh battery. Underneath, we've got a mini USB, which shows the chip's age for power, USB port for the external controllers, headphone jack, and a micro HDMI port. So overall, it is a very budget looking and feeling shell. Jumping over to the controls, things don't get any better unfortunately, with 2 of the worst sliders I think I've ever used. I've never particularly been a fan of sliders anywhere, to be fair, but these are just unquestionably terrible. They get stuck, and I mean wedged, if you apply a bit too much pressure or move too sharply in any direction, which pretty much renders them useless, despite them also being uncomfortable. The D-pad actually feels okay in terms of its literal plastic texture, but this thing falls into the shell whenever my thumb gets anywhere near it. There is 0 pivot to the D-pad too, so it just feels my thumb is sliding all over the top with no physical feedback as to what and where is being pressed. The volume, menu, start and select buttons easily press into the shell too, and they just don't feel nice to press. In fact, the only nice thing I can say about the whole controls is the fact that the face buttons are actually okay. They are far from great, but they, alongside the shoulder buttons, are the only part of the whole control scheme you actually get some form of response back when pressing them, and they don't collapse into the shell when you do. The XGB35 also suffers from being a very rattly handheld, with the shoulder buttons especially shaking in place, which makes the whole thing just feel and sound cheap. So, needless to say, I'm not a fan of the controls overall. Jumping over to the firmware now, we've got a Pandora Arcade-esque feeling budget OS, which isn't too bad for a budget option to be fair. It's got a safe shutdown, save states, controller remapping, and limited scaling options, though it does come with its fair share of quirks, like an update option that just crushes the handheld until you force a shutdown, some super quirky naming with its default ROM set, and a bit of jankiness while just navigating around. So I'll cut to some gameplay footage now and summarise back up at the end. So the XGB35, unfortunately for me, is just wasted potential overall. Things like the bizarre sanded down finish to the front, uneven large bezels around the screen, and how much the shell just rattles shows off its budget roots, and the controls are just terrible, making the XGB35 very difficult to recommend overall. So that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching.